Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Al Schmidt, Acting Secretary of State, and this is Jonathan Marks, Deputy Secretary of State for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The people who run elections have a saying, and that is, you will never see a headline that reads, "Election Day went smoothly." But that was what we experienced today in Pennsylvania. I want to begin by thanking the hundreds of local election officials and the approximately 50,000 poll workers who made democracy possible today. Because of them, Pennsylvanians were able to cast their vote at approximately 9,000 precincts across Pennsylvania in our 67 counties. And because of their hard work, of election officials and poll workers, the Commonwealth, yet again, held a free and fair, safe and secure election. We had reports of only a few minor and isolated issues occurring sporadically in the Commonwealth. For example, in York County, road construction blocked access from one direction to a polling place at Conewago Elementary School for several hours. The Department of State worked with the utility company. We worked with PEMA, the construction company, and others to correct the issue. And I personally spoke to the judge of elections to get a read of what was going on the ground and whatever impact that might have resulted in. The county successfully petitioned the Court of Common Pleas to extend the hours at that polling place for voting to accommodate any voters who were unable to vote earlier in the day. So any eligible voter in line by 9:30 p.m. this evening at that polling place will be able to cast their vote. During today's election, the Department of State staff responded to approximately 600 calls to our voter hotline, which is lower than recent comparable municipal election cycles. We won't have final turnout figures, as you know, until every eligible vote is counted. As a former county election official, I know how hard it is that election officials have been working and that their day began well before the polls open at 7 a.m. this morning and will continue uninterrupted in the days ahead. Across Pennsylvania, they are now busily counting ballots cast today at the polls and mail-in ballots returned over the past several weeks. Pennsylvanians requested nearly 800,000 mail-in and absentee ballots for this election, and that's roughly, as of last count, an hour or two ago, about 74% returned. It's important to remember that counties could not begin counting those ballots until 7 a.m. this morning. So it is a lengthy process still ahead, and that the last of those ballots were received only an hour or so ago by 8 p.m. We know everyone wants the results of the election as soon as possible, but counties must first make sure that every eligible ballot is accurately and securely counted. You can find the latest unofficial results as counties submit them and on the Department of State's website, which is www.electionreturns.pa.gov. Remember, the results are unofficial until certification occurs a few weeks from now. I want to thank our partners at the federal and state level who worked hard to ensure the safety and security of this election. And finally, want to thank all the Pennsylvanians who took the time out to vote this election day. As Thomas Jefferson said, we have government by the majority who participate, and we're grateful for their participation. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Mark.
Hi, good evening. Among those calls and your hotline and any other source, you mentioned the York County incident. Was there any other case where voters were delayed or polling places were shut down or problems? Were there any issues regarding police being called to any polling places, conflicts, anything at all? Is the York County thing really as bad as it got?
So we track every incident that comes our way and record details on it and the final disposition of that incident, whether it was addressed or not addressed. The issues that we saw today are, in my experience running elections for 10 years, fairly routine. It doesn't mean they're insignificant. Every vote is precious. You don't want a single voter to ever be turned away, let alone inconvenienced when casting their vote. But the issues were very similar as we've seen in the past with so many polling places and so many election board workers who are essentially volunteering for what accounts to about a 14-hour day. There was nothing out of the ordinary that we experienced today.
I'm Barbara with
Yes.
WGAL. Hi. They still can't canvass. I know I'm talking to a lot of county officials before, can't start opening them until 7 a.m. election day. With a big election looking far in the future next year, is that something you're just kind of waiting to see what will play out in the legislature, or what do you hear from county election workers about that issue?
In my experience talking to election officials across the Commonwealth in big cities and rural counties, Democrats and Republicans alike, that is something I've consistently and uniformly heard from election administrators, is the ability to begin processing mail-in ballots prior to 7 a.m. on election morning. That doesn't even mean counting a single ballot, but it's a lengthy assembly line process, as you can imagine, between reviewing the sufficiency of the declaration envelope, opening the declaration envelope, extracting the secrecy envelope, or opening that, extracting the ballot, flattening the ballot, and then finally tabulating. And there are plenty of states that do that process, including Florida and others. And that's why they're able to report their mail-in ballot results earlier, because they are allowed to do so much preparation prior to Election Day that simply results in them counting the votes beginning at 7 a.m. as opposed to beginning that whole process at 7 a.m. It also, I would add, adds to the integrity of the process so that you don't end up with election board workers working 24 hours a day in 8-hour shifts. It allows observers to observe the process in a more kind of thoughtful and methodical way, as opposed to having, a room with dozens of clerks working. You might have just a dozen at a time working. So it's definitely a benefit to election administration, and also results in, as I said, knowing who won and who lost and by how much that much earlier, and minimizes an opportunity for any efforts to discredit election results from kind of exploiting that window of time that it takes in between. Thank you. Yes.
Just a follow-up. I'm sorry if this is a little redundant. I just want to make sure. Besides York County, do you know of any other county where anything election-related ended up in front of a judge in court today?
I'm not aware of any case in the Commonwealth where polling hours were extended. The issues that we saw, as I said, were fairly routine, did not result in voters being turned away. If a voting machine was down, voters can still cast a vote by an emergency provisional ballot and have that ballot counted. So that is the thing that is of utmost importance in making sure that whatever problems you face, voters can still cast their vote uninterrupted on or before 8 p.m. this evening.
Do you have any idea of turnout today?
We really don't. I mean, it's very hard to see. Even at the county level, it's hard to predict what turnout will be, but we'll certainly know that soon enough. Anything you hear on Election Day is largely anecdotal, so I'm always hesitant to repeat what you hear. But obviously, we want every registered voter to have cast their vote today. Every election, as we say, is important.
Secretary?
Yes, sir.
Philadelphia County flagged about 1,400 ballots, mail-in ballots, for deficiencies such as signatures and dates. Do you know how many of those ballots, and they did publish the name of the people who presented those ballots and gave time to cure. Do you know how many of those ballots might have been cured in the time that, or the end of the day today?
I don't know. The county, in this case, Philadelphia County, would have access to that information in sort of real time. That's one thing I know Philadelphia County does, is post the names of voters and some information so that if they cast a vote by mail that has a fatal defect, like they didn't sign it or they didn't date it, the voter would still be able to, cast their ballot and have it counted. Doesn't result in 2 ballots being counted or anything like that, but it gives them the opportunity to have their vote counted.
And is that something that you think your office would recommend to all counties throughout the Commonwealth, to give a period to cure deficient ballots? I know it's been discussed before, but it seems like it's a pretty big item.
Well, counties do have that ability to. Some are doing it and some are not. Ultimately, you want as much uniformity as possible when it comes to election administration from county to county, and obviously you want to create as many opportunities as there is for a voter to still have their ballot counted. And in this case, you end up with fatal defects where a voter maybe wrote their birthday instead of the date or something like that. It's not a question of whether the voter's a registered voter. It's not a question of whether it was that voter's vote. But you have these fatal defects that result in ballots not being counted. And having run elections, having literally held in my hand the trays of mail-in ballots that aren't counted, it's something you want to do everything you can to mitigate because every vote is precious. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. And if you have any other follow-up questions, please let us know, and we'll be happy to be of assistance.
11 o'clock update.
We don't have any reason to believe there'll be an 11 o'clock update, but obviously we'll reach out to you if there's any issues worth reporting.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.